When you wake up at 2 in the morning, half asleep, annoyed, your feet touching the cold floor, and you walk through the dark toward the bathroom. The first thought in your mind is probably not a scientific one. You probably think, not again. I just fell asleep. But stop for 1 second, just 1 second, and ask a very simple question. Why now? Why did the body not warn you earlier? When you were still awake? When you were looking at your phone? When you were walking around the house? Why did it wait until the room became quiet? Until the lights were off? Until your mind finally let go of the day? And then suddenly decide, now, the bladder must be emptied. Most of us blame the bladder immediately. That seems reasonable, because that is where the feeling appears. You feel pressure there. You urinate from there. So you assume the story begins there. But wait, that is a little too quick. The bladder does not create water by itself. It is not a secret faucet inside the body, opening at night just to annoy you. It is the final storage tank, a sensitive one, with muscle, nerves, and a very effective way of telling the brain, hey, we are getting full down here. But the liquid inside the bladder had to come from somewhere first. It had to pass through the kidneys. And the kidneys do not work randomly. They look at the blood, the pressure, the salt, the water, the hormones, and they decide what the body should keep and what it can afford to release. So, if we really want to understand why you pee at 2 in the morning, maybe we should not begin with the toilet. And maybe not even with the bladder. Maybe we should begin a little lower, with your legs. That sounds strange. I know. Your legs? What do your ankles and calves have to do with a bathroom trip in the middle of the night? But the body does not work like a set of separate departments. The feet do not live one life. The heart, another. The kidneys, another, and the bladder another. Blood from the legs has to return to the heart. The heart pushes blood through the body. The kidneys filter that blood. Urine flows down to the bladder. And all of this happens under one condition we almost never think about. We are standing on Earth. That means gravity is always present. Not loud, not mysterious, but always pulling things downward. During the day, when you stand, sit for hours, drive, work at a desk, or simply do not move very much, your legs are usually below your heart. Your heart is still pumping blood. Your veins are still carrying blood back. Your calf muscles help squeeze blood upward when you walk, and little valves in the veins help stop blood from slipping backward. It is a very clever system, but it is not perfect. If you sit too long, stand too long, or if your circulation is not returning fluid as efficiently as it once did, a little fluid can collect in the lower parts of the body. Sometimes you can see it clearly. Your socks leave rings around your ankles. Your shoes feel tighter at night than they did in the morning. The skin around the ankle looks a little stretched. Sometimes you do not see it clearly at all, because the amount is small. But the body does not need a dramatic event before it reacts. A small change in fluid volume can still matter to a system that is always measuring pressure, concentration, and balance. The body is not waiting for a flood. It responds to small differences. Now look at the moment you lie down. This is the important part. Not a medical miracle. Not a mysterious bladder signal from nowhere. Just a change in position. When you are standing, your feet are below your heart. When you lie down, your feet are much closer to the same level as your heart. The tall vertical column of fluid from the daytime is now closer to a horizontal one. And when the geometry changes, the pressure changes too. Some of the fluid that spent the day lingering in the legs can return more easily into the circulation. Once that fluid comes back into the bloodstream, the body has to deal with it. The heart receives a little more returning volume. The circulation senses the change. And the kidneys do what kidneys do. They filter, adjust, keep what should be kept, and remove what the body no longer needs to hold. And where does the result finally go? Into the bladder. So the bladder often gets blamed unfairly. It is where you feel the problem, but it may not be where the story began. It is a little like hearing the doorbell and blaming the bell for the visitor. The bell is not the cause. It is only the signal that the story has reached your door. The bladder is similar. It makes the problem noticeable, but the chain may have started many hours earlier. Maybe while you were sitting in a chair at 4 p.m, calves barely moving, feet below the heart, and gravity quietly doing what gravity always does. Now we have to be careful here. Not everyone who wakes up at night to urinate has fluid collecting in the legs. That would be too simple. And science should not make things simple in a false way. Sometimes the reason is obvious. A large drink before bed, coffee too late, alcohol in the evening. Sometimes it is medication, poor sleep, an overactive bladder, prostate enlargement, blood sugar problems, kidney disease, heart problems, sleep apnea, or something that deserves real medical attention if it keeps happening. So no, the legs are not always the answer. But they can be part of one very real physical mechanism. That mechanism is simple enough to say plainly. During the day, fluid can gather in the lower legs. At night, when you lie down, some of that fluid can return more easily to the blood. The kidneys process the extra fluid. Urine is made. The bladder fills, and you wake up. In other words, the body's night does not begin only when you turn off the light. It begins when you change position. The direction of gravity across your body changes. The ankles are no longer the lowest reservoir, and the fluid system gets a new condition to solve. And the body is not doing anything strange here. It is being honest with the new condition. It measures the fluid in circulation, adjusts the pressure, lets the kidneys work, and then sends the brain a very rude little message. Wake up. We are running out of storage space. That is annoying. Yes. But it is also a useful clue, because it reminds us that the place where we feel a problem is not always the place where the problem began. That is what I like about the physical way of thinking. It tells us not to stop at the loudest part of the system. Ask what happened before this. Where did the water come from? Why did it arrive at night? What changed when the body went from standing to lying down? And why could a quiet pair of legs during the day have anything to do with a bathroom trip at 2 a.m? So the next time you wake up in the dark, irritated, looking at the clock and thinking, why again? Do not immediately imagine that the body is betraying you. It may simply be reporting a change in a living fluid system under gravity. A system made of a heart, blood vessels, kidneys, a bladder, legs, and all the small habits of your day. The bathroom trip is only the visible ending. The real story may have started much earlier. In the afternoon, when you sat still for too long, carrying a small ocean inside your vessels and tissues, while the earth quietly pulled on it. Have you ever taken off your socks at night and seen that little ring around your ankle? Just a small line in the skin. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that makes you stop and say, "Oh no, something is terribly wrong." Most of us see it for half a second, then forget it. We throw the socks somewhere, wash our face, turn off the light, and go to sleep. Then at 2 a.m, the body gives us the most annoying little message in the world. Get up. The bladder is full. Now here is the part people miss. That trip to the bathroom may not have started at 2 a.m. It may have started at 2 p.m, when you were sitting in a chair, barely moving your legs, with your feet hanging below your heart. I know, that sounds odd, because we usually think of urine as a bladder story. The bladder fills. The bladder complains. We wake up. End of story. But the body is rarely that neat. The bladder is just where the story becomes loud enough for you to notice. The quiet part may have begun much lower down, near the ankles. Let me be careful here. Your legs are not making urine. That would be the wrong cartoon. There are no tiny bladders hiding under your knees. Your legs are more like a waiting room for fluid. During the day, especially if you sit for a long time, a little extra fluid can linger in the tissues of the lower legs. Not a bucket. Not some frightening amount. Just a little more than usual. Enough to leave a sock mark. Enough to make your shoes feel a bit tighter. Enough that your ankles look slightly fuller by evening. Why does that happen? Well, because all day long your body is doing a slightly ridiculous job. It is trying to move blood and water around inside a tall, upright shape, while gravity keeps pulling downward. Gravity is not evil. It is not attacking you. It is just there. But it means the lower parts of the body live under a different pressure situation than the upper parts. Your feet are below your heart. Your ankles are below your heart. And the fluid down there has to be brought back upward. Now, the body is clever. It has help. When you walk, your calf muscles squeeze the veins in your legs. Those veins have one-way valves. So the squeeze helps push blood back toward the heart. This is why walking is not just transportation. Walking is also a little pump, hidden inside the ordinary movement of your legs. Every step gives the circulation a bit of assistance. It is like saying to the blood, "Come on, back upstairs." But suppose you sit for hours. Your knees are bent. Your calves are quiet. Your feet are down. And nothing much seems to be happening. That is the sneaky part. The body can change very quietly. You do not need pain. You do not need obvious swelling. You do not need some big medical drama. A little bit of fluid can simply spend too much time in the lower tissues. It is still your fluid. Still part of the body. Not lost. Not wasted. It is just waiting in a place that will matter later. Think of it like this. During the day, your lower legs can become a small waiting room. Not a storage tank with flashing warning lights. Just a quiet waiting room. A little fluid sits there because gravity is pulling down. The calf pump is not helping much, and the body is still managing the situation well enough that you do not notice it. Then bedtime comes. You lie down, and the whole geometry changes. Your ankles are no longer far below your heart in the same way. The uphill battle becomes easier. The fluid that was delayed in the legs now has a better road back into the blood. And no, there is no little door opening in the ankle. I say that because the picture can get silly very quickly. Nothing is pouring straight from your leg into your bladder. The fluid has to return to the bloodstream first. Then it goes through the normal circulation, reaches the kidneys, and the kidneys do their quiet night work. They look at the blood in their own physical way, not with eyes, not with thoughts, but through pressure, flow, and chemistry. Then they decide what stays in the body and what leaves as urine. And that word decide needs a little care. I do not mean the kidney is sitting there like a tired accountant with a pencil behind its ear. I mean the kidney is built so that the result looks like a decision. Too much water returning to the blood, some of it may be sent out. The bladder slowly fills, stretches, and sends a signal upward. And then your sleeping brain gets interrupted. Not by a mystery, but by a chain of very ordinary events that began hours earlier. That is the strange thing about the 2 a.m. bathroom trip. It feels sudden. It feels like the bladder just woke up and became rude. But sometimes it is simply the final scene of a much longer story. A chair in the afternoon. Quiet calves, a little sock mark, then lying flat at night. Then the kidneys, seeing more returning fluid. Then the bladder filling while you are trying to sleep. By the time you notice it, the physics has already been working for hours. So the next time you see that little ring from your socks, do not panic, but do not dismiss it completely either. It may be a small sign that your body has spent the day moving water around under the rules of gravity. Then when you lie down, the arrangement changes. Some delayed fluid returns to the blood. The kidneys notice. The bladder fills. And the brain gets the message. It feels like the night woke you up. But maybe the story began much earlier, with a chair, a quiet pair of calves, and a small mark around your ankle. There is a small thing that happens when you go to bed, and it is so ordinary that we almost never notice it. You turn off the light. Maybe you put your phone down. Maybe you pull the blanket up, and then you lie down. That sounds like the beginning of sleep. But for the body, it is also the beginning of a little physics experiment. You have just turned the whole body sideways relative to gravity. I know. That sounds too mechanical. Almost like I am describing a chair instead of a person. But stay with it. Because this small change can matter more than we think. All day long, your feet are below your heart. Your ankles are carrying more pressure than your chest. And gravity has been quietly encouraging fluid to spend more time in the lower part of the body. Not a flood. Not something dramatic. Just a small shift in where the water is sitting. Then you lie flat. And the body gets a different problem. The legs are no longer hanging far below the heart in the same way. The ankles are no longer the lowest place in the same way. And the pressure pattern that existed while you were upright begins to change. This is not magic, and it is not instant. It is more like a slow rearrangement. Some of the fluid that spent the day down in the lower tissues can begin to move back toward the bloodstream. I want to say that carefully, because this is where the explanation can easily become silly. The water in your legs does not shoot straight into your bladder. There is no secret pipe from your ankle to the toilet, though that would be a very simple machine. The body is not built like that. Fluid has to return to the blood first, through tiny vessels, through lymphatic drainage, through the slow, ordinary plumbing of living tissue. Only after it comes back into circulation can the rest of the story begin. Think about a normal day. Maybe you sit for hours, knees bent, feet down, calves barely moving. Or maybe you stand for a long time, talking, working, waiting. By evening, your socks may leave those little rings around your ankles. Your shoes may feel tighter than they did in the morning. Your lower legs may feel heavy. Not painful, exactly. Just heavy in that dull way people usually ignore. These are not always signs of something serious, but they are clues. They tell us that the body at night may not be starting from the same fluid arrangement it had in the morning. And this matters because when you finally lie down, some of that quiet daytime fluid can begin to come back toward the center of the body. This is why the timing can fool us. You wake up at 2 a.m. You look at the clock. You feel annoyed. And the first question is usually, why now? Maybe you think, did I drink too much before bed? Sometimes yes. That can be the answer. But sometimes the better question is not what did I drink at night? Sometimes the better question is, where was my water during the day? That sounds like an odd question at first, but it is a good physical question. Water has to be somewhere. If it was not in the bladder yet, it may have been in the blood, or in the tissues, or sitting lower in the body because gravity and posture made that easier. And causes in the body do not always look immediate. We like simple timing. I drink water. Then I pee. Fine. That happens. But the body also works through delays, storage, slow return, and thresholds. The thing that wakes you at 2 a.m. may have started much earlier. It may have started while you were sitting at noon, or standing in the afternoon, or lying down at bedtime when gravity stopped pulling fluid in quite the same direction. So, if we only look at the clock, we enter the story too late. The clock shows the moment you notice the problem. It does not necessarily show the moment the problem began. Once more fluid comes back into the bloodstream. The heart and blood vessels can sense that change. Not sense it like a person thinking. Of course. The heart is not saying, "Ah, here comes the ankle water." But the body has sensors everywhere. It notices stretch, pressure, flow, salt concentration, all the little signals that tell it whether the internal environment is balanced or not. If the central circulation feels a little fuller after you lie down, the body may treat that as extra volume that should be corrected. And one of the main organs that corrects volume is the kidney. Now, the kidney is not just a simple filter. This is another place where the picture in our head can be too crude. A kitchen strainer lets small things pass and holds big things back. The kidney does something more careful than that. It filters fluid from the blood, then takes back much of what the body still needs. If the body needs water, it keeps more water. If the body has more volume than it wants, it can let more water go. If salt balance needs adjusting, it adjusts that too. I like to think of it less like a filter and more like an editor. It does not simply throw things away. It revises the fluid until the final version becomes urine. That urine then travels down to the bladder. And now, only now, the bladder becomes the part you feel. That is an important order, because we usually blame the bladder first. We blame it because it is the thing that wakes us, but it may not be the first actor in the chain. The bladder may simply be the bell at the end of the hallway. Before it rings, posture has changed. Fluid has returned. Blood volume has shifted. The kidneys have responded. And urine has slowly collected. Then the bladder wall stretches. At first, the signal may be small. If you are in deep sleep, your brain may ignore it. But drop by drop, the pressure rises. The stretch signal becomes stronger, and eventually the message is loud enough to wake you. You experience it as sudden. But the filling was not sudden. The last signal was sudden, not the whole process. This happens with many things in life. A pot of water sits on the stove and nothing seems to happen. Then suddenly bubbles appear. But heat was entering the water the whole time. A room seems dark. Then your eyes adjust. But the light did not suddenly become different. Your bladder feels fine. Then suddenly it is not fine. But the body may have been filling it slowly for an hour or two before you became aware of it. This is the little trap. Consciousness notices thresholds, but biology often moves continuously. So the 2 a.m. bathroom trip feels like a sudden event, when underneath it may be the end of a slow curve. And here we should be honest. The legs are not always the reason. I do not want to turn this into one of those internet tricks. Raise your legs and you will never wake up again. No. Bodies are not that obedient. Sometimes the cause really is too much fluid late at night. Sometimes caffeine or alcohol changes both urine production and sleep quality. Sometimes medication timing matters. Sometimes the bladder is overactive. Sometimes diabetes, sleep apnea, heart disease, kidney disease, or prostate problems are involved. And if there is pain, blood in the urine, fever, severe thirst, sudden change, shortness of breath, or major swelling, that is not something to solve with a clever explanation. That is something to discuss with a clinician. Physics can help us see a mechanism, but it does not replace medical judgment. But when this leg fluid pathway is present, the chain is not mysterious. It is ordinary physics inside a living body. During the day, gravity and posture can help fluid spend more time in the lower legs. At night, lying down can let some of that fluid return to the blood. The body senses the change. The kidneys adjust the water balance. The bladder fills. The brain wakes when the signal becomes strong enough. So the trip to the bathroom is not the whole movie. Let me say that less dramatically. It is just the part you notice. The quieter part may have happened earlier, when your socks left marks, when your shoes felt tight, when your calves stayed still for hours, when gravity was doing its boring little job all day. And maybe that is the useful way to think about it. When the body wakes you at night, do not only ask, "Why is my bladder full now?" Ask where the water was before the night began. Now we have followed the water far enough to notice something very simple. The bathroom trip at 2 in the morning is not really where the story begins. It is just where you finally notice the story. That is the annoying part. Right? You are asleep. The room is dark. The body gives you one signal, and suddenly the whole problem feels like it came from the bladder. But maybe the bladder is only the loud part. Maybe it is the alarm bell. The quieter part may have started much earlier, while you were sitting, standing, walking less than usual, or ending the day with your ankles a little fuller than they were in the morning. So let us ask the question in a less dramatic way. Fluid comes back from the legs when you lie down. Yes. It returns more easily toward the central circulation. Yes. The kidneys receive blood under a slightly different condition. Yes. But why does that become urine? Why does the kidney not simply keep the water until morning and let you sleep? That question is the whole trick. Because the kidney is not a simple drain. A drain is stupid. Water arrives. Water leaves. The kidney is not like that. The kidney is more like a very strict editor sitting there all night saying, "Keep this. Send that back. Remove a little of this. Do not waste that." It is not only asking what should leave the body. It is asking what must be saved so the body can keep working. Think of every cell as a tiny little shop on a street. The shop can do its work only if the street outside is kept in reasonable order. Not too salty. Not too watery. Not too acidic. Not under the wrong pressure. If the fluid outside the cell becomes too concentrated, water is pulled out of the cell. If it becomes too diluted, water pushes in. If salt balance goes wrong, nerves do not signal properly. Muscles do not behave properly. Even the heart does not get to ignore chemistry just because you are asleep. So when the kidney makes urine, it is not just throwing water away. It is helping protect the small chemical conditions that let you wake up in the morning as yourself. Now, I know that sounds too grand for someone standing half asleep in the hallway. You are not thinking about salt gradients at 2 in the morning. You are thinking, "Why is this happening again?" But the body does not care whether the moment feels ordinary or embarrassing or irritating. It only reads signals. Pressure. Stretch. Flow. Salt. Hormones. That is its language. During the day, gravity can make the lower body a kind of pressure problem. Not a disaster, just a problem the body has to manage. If you sit for a long time, the leg muscles are not squeezing the veins very much. If you stand for a long time, gravity keeps pulling fluid downward. By evening, maybe there is a faint sock mark. Maybe the ankle feels a little tight. Maybe you barely notice it. Then you lie down. And the geometry changes. That is a plain word for it. Geometry. Upright is one arrangement. Lying flat is another. With the legs no longer hanging below the heart in the same way, some of that stored fluid can move back toward the middle of the body more easily. The vessels feel a different filling condition. The heart receives a different return. The kidneys see the blood under a slightly different situation. The body does not say, "Ah, yes, calf fluid has arrived." It has no little narrator inside explaining the plot. It simply responds to the numbers it can feel without using numerals. Stretch in a vessel wall. Pressure in circulation. Flow through the kidney. Hormone levels in the blood. And here is where the bladder can fool us. Because it is the part we feel directly. When it fills enough, it sends the signal. So naturally we blame it. But the bladder may not be the origin. It may just be the room where the message becomes loud. The earlier message may have been written in the legs, in posture, in blood volume, in kidney regulation. This is why the amount of urine matters. If you wake up several times but only pass a small amount, that points the thinking one way. Maybe the bladder is irritated. Maybe storage is the issue. Maybe the prostate is involved. Maybe you woke for another reason and only then noticed the bladder. But if you wake once or twice and each time there is a large amount, that is a different clue. Then we have to ask whether more urine is being made at night. And why? This is where a hormone called vasopressin enters the story. But let us not make the name heavier than the idea. Vasopressin is one of the signals that helps the kidney save water. At night, many bodies normally make less urine, so sleep is not constantly interrupted. That makes sense. A creature that wakes every hour to empty its bladder is not resting well. So the body often tries to make urine smaller in volume and more concentrated while we sleep. But bodies change. Age can change that rhythm. Poor sleep can change it. Breathing problems during sleep can affect the system. Medications can change it. Illness can change it. So, if nighttime water saving is weaker than usual, and at the same time extra fluid is returning from the legs, the bladder may fill before morning. Not because one villain attacked the night, but because several small things lined up. That is usually how living systems get us into trouble. Not always with one giant cause, but with several modest causes acting together. A little more fluid in the legs, a little more return after lying down, a little less water saving by the kidneys, a bladder that reaches its signal threshold a little early, sleep that is a little lighter because of stress, noise, age, or breathing pauses. Each one alone may not wake you. Together, they can. That is not a vague answer. That is the honest shape of many body problems. The final effect feels sudden because consciousness only joins the story at the end. Picture the evening again. You take off your socks, and maybe there is a faint ring above the ankle. You press a finger gently into the shin, and maybe the skin holds a tiny dent for a moment. Or maybe there is no obvious dent, only a sense that the shoes felt tighter than usual. You do not build a theory out of it. You just go to bed. You brush your teeth, turn off the light, lie down. For the first hour, nothing seems to happen. But inside the body, the arrangement is changing. Fluid that was easier to hold in the lower limbs during the day can now return more easily. The kidney begins its quiet accounting. The bladder slowly fills. Then at 2 a.m, the alarm rings. You feel the ending. But the body lived through the whole chain. This is also why gravity matters here. But not in a mystical way. We do not need to say the moon controls your bladder. That is the wrong kind of poetry. The useful idea is much simpler. Fluids respond to forces, position, pressure, and geometry. Standing is one condition. Sitting still is another. Walking is another, because the muscles squeeze the veins and help return blood. Lying flat is another, because the lower body is no longer playing the same role as a reservoir below the heart. Change the position, and you change the fluid problem. Change the fluid problem, and the kidney may change its response. Astronauts show the same principle in a louder way. In microgravity, fluid does not pool down into the legs the way it does on Earth. More fluid shifts toward the upper body and head. Faces can look puffier. Legs can look thinner. The body may interpret some of that central shift as extra volume. Then hormones and kidneys respond. You do not need to go to orbit to understand your own bedroom. But orbit makes the principle hard to miss. Change gravity or posture, and fluid distribution changes. Change distribution, and regulation can change. Change regulation, and urine production can change. Same physics, different scale. Now, we have to be careful, because understanding a mechanism is not the same as diagnosing yourself. If nighttime urination is new, severe, rapidly worsening, painful, or comes with blood in the urine, fever, intense thirst, unexplained weight change, shortness of breath, chest discomfort, or significant leg swelling, then do not turn this into a clever bedroom theory. Get medical evaluation. Physics can help us see the chain, but medicine has to look at the person, the history, the medications, the examination, the tests, and the risks. That humility matters. But there is still something useful you can take from this without pretending to be your own doctor. Observe. Not panic. Observe. Are the ankles fuller at night than in the morning? Does a long day of sitting make the night worse? Does walking change the pattern? Does raising the legs earlier in the evening shift the timing? When you wake, is there a large amount of urine or only a little? Did the bladder wake you? Or did you wake first and then notice the bladder? These questions do not diagnose the cause by themselves, but they make the problem less foggy. They turn "I keep waking up" into a clearer physical story. And there is a human side to this too. People can feel embarrassed by nocturia, or irritated, or worried that the body is simply becoming unreliable. But the body is often not being foolish. It may be trying to maintain balance with the conditions it was given. Gravity, veins, kidneys, hormones, sleep, age. Maybe one long afternoon in a chair with the legs hanging down and the muscles barely helping the blood return. That does not mean every symptom is harmless. It means the first attitude should be respect. A signal from the body is not always proof that the machine is broken. Sometimes it is proof that the machine is still trying to protect itself. So maybe 2 in the morning is not the start. Maybe it is just the moment the body finally gets your attention. The legs may have stored a little fluid during the day. Lying down may have returned some of it to the central circulation. The kidney may have interpreted that extra volume as something to correct. Nighttime hormones may not have reduced urine enough. The bladder may have crossed its threshold before morning. and the sleeping brain got called back into the room. Not pleasant. No one is pretending it is pleasant. But it is less mysterious. The bladder shouted. But the body had been whispering for hours. And once you see that chain, the bathroom trip becomes more than a random annoyance in the dark. It becomes a clue. Not a diagnosis. Not a reason to panic. Just a clue. The body speaks through small things. Sock marks. Posture. Swelling. Thirst. Sleep quality. The amount of urine produced. The job is not to make the body sound cold or mechanical. The job is to follow the chain without blaming the wrong link. And if we do that, even a tired walk to the bathroom at 2 a.m. becomes a little more understandable. It is not just interruption. It is regulation becoming loud enough to wake us. So now we are back in that hallway again. The house is quiet. The floor is a little cold under your feet. And you are standing there half awake thinking, why now? Why does the body always choose the worst possible time to make an announcement? You were asleep. Finally asleep. And then the body gives one simple command. Get up. Most of us blame the bladder immediately. That is natural, because the bladder is the one shouting loudest. It is the part you feel, the part that interrupts the dream, the part that makes you walk through the dark like a very annoyed scientist conducting an experiment he never volunteered for. But wait, blaming the bladder may be a little too quick. The bladder may be where you notice the problem, but it may not be where the problem began. That is a small difference, but it changes the whole story. Let me put it in a very plain way. During the day, your body is not just sitting there like a statue. It is a moving bag of water, tubes, pumps, valves, membranes, salts, nerves, and pressure sensors. That sounds funny, but it is closer to the truth than the neat picture we carry in our heads. Now suppose you sit for many hours, maybe at a desk, maybe in a car, maybe you stand for a long time without moving your legs much. Your ankles and calves are down below the heart, and gravity is working the whole time. It does not announce itself. It does not feel dramatic. It just keeps pulling downward. Little by little, fluid can collect more in the lower parts of the body. Maybe you see it clearly. Maybe you do not. Maybe your socks leave deeper marks than usual. Maybe your shoes feel tighter in the evening. Maybe your ankles look a little puffy. Or maybe the only clue is that the night keeps getting interrupted. Now this is the part I want to slow down, because it is easy to make it sound more mysterious than it is. There is no magic here. There is only position, pressure, fluid, and time. When you are upright, the legs are lower. So the pressure situation in the legs is different from the pressure situation near the chest. That does not mean something is automatically wrong. It just means the body is living inside gravity. And living inside gravity has consequences. We are used to thinking about gravity when a planet orbits a star, or when a rocket leaves Earth. But the same kind of physical thinking matters when your socks leave a mark on your ankle. Not as a grand cosmic speech, just as a simple observation. The fluid in the body has to deal with height, pressure, and circulation all day long. Then you lie down, and the geometry changes. I like that word geometry here, because nothing magical happened. You did not become a different person. You only changed the arrangement of the body. The legs are no longer hanging below the heart in the same way. The fluid that was spending more time in the lower parts of the body may now return more easily into the bloodstream. Not like someone opened a dam. Not like a dramatic rush. Just gradually. Quietly. Enough for the body to notice. And who notices? The kidneys notice. The kidneys are not just little strainers sitting there doing one simple job. They are more like careful accountants, always checking water, salt, pressure, volume, and what the body can afford to keep or throw away. So if extra fluid returns to the circulation during the night, the kidneys may say, "All right, there is more volume here than we need to hold on to." And then they do what kidneys do. They filter, they adjust. They send some of that water out as urine. A little later, the bladder fills, stretches, and sends a message up through the nerves. Then the brain, which was trying to sleep peacefully, receives the most unwelcome message in the world. We have to get up. And suddenly you are in the hallway, blaming the bladder, when the first chapter of the story may have been written hours earlier in the legs. Now, I have to be careful here, because this is where a good explanation can become a bad certainty. This does not mean every person who wakes at 2 a.m. has fluid stored in the legs. It does not mean the legs are always the reason. It does not mean you should diagnose yourself from a video. If you drank a large glass of water before bed, well, we probably do not need to summon the entire machinery of physics. If you had coffee or alcohol late in the evening, that may matter. If you woke up for some other reason and then decided to use the bathroom because you were already awake, that is another story too. And if there is burning, pain, blood in the urine, fever, strong thirst, sudden swelling, shortness of breath, or a new pattern that keeps repeating, then do not turn that into a little internet puzzle. That belongs in a real medical conversation. Careful thinking does not replace a doctor. It helps you ask better questions when you speak to one. But as a mechanism, this one is worth understanding, because it makes the body feel less like a collection of separate parts, and more like one connected system. The bladder is not a lonely troublemaker. The legs are not just things that carry you around. The kidneys are not just making urine randomly. They are all in the same conversation. The legs may hold more fluid during the day. Lying down may return some of it to circulation. The kidneys may process the extra volume. The bladder may fill. And the brain may wake you only at the end. So the bathroom trip is not necessarily the whole event. It may be the last visible part of an event that began while you were sitting, standing, driving, working, or simply not moving your legs very much. And I like this example precisely because it is not glamorous. Nobody makes a poster of a person walking to the bathroom at 2 a.m. Nobody says, yes, the poetry of nocturnal urination. It is annoying, ordinary, and a little ridiculous. But that is why it is useful. Physics is not only in the spectacular things. It is not only in black holes, rockets, galaxies, and equations on a board. It is also in the boring little facts of being alive. Your ankle is lower than your chest when you stand. Fluid responds to pressure. Kidneys respond to volume. Nerves respond to stretch. and sleep gets interrupted when the signal becomes strong enough. That is not fancy, but it is real. So maybe the useful thing to carry away is not fear, and not a single magic answer. The useful thing is a better question. If this happens once in a while, maybe it is just timing, fluid intake, sleep depth, or ordinary variation. But if it happens again and again, now you can observe more intelligently. Are your socks leaving deep grooves at night? Do your shoes feel tighter in the evening? Have you been sitting for long hours? Is the amount of urine large each time? Are you waking because of urgency, or waking first and only then deciding to go? Those questions do not make the situation more frightening. They make it less vague. And less vague is always better than guessing in the dark. That is the habit I would want from a good science explanation. Do not stop at the first obvious answer, but do not invent a dramatic one either. Follow the cause backward. Check each step. Leave room for exceptions. And know when the question belongs with a professional. The bladder woke you. Yes. But maybe the legs helped start the story. Maybe gravity played its quiet part. Maybe the kidneys translated the extra volume into urine. And maybe the brain simply heard the final complaint. No need to make it mystical. It is already interesting enough when it is physical. So if you find yourself awake tonight, standing there in the hallway, irritated and cold-footed, maybe pause for 1 second before blaming only the bladder. Not to romanticize it, not to ignore it, and certainly not to diagnose yourself from one idea. Just to see the body a little more clearly. Water moved. Pressure changed. Tissues held and released fluid. Kidneys filtered. Nerves signaled. And the brain received the message as one simple command. Get up. That is enough. Not heroic physics. Not textbook physics. Just the kind of physics you live with. Even when you would rather be asleep.